Good morning, Neighborhood Church, and welcome to Read Scripture, where we come together online to read the Bible each morning. This week, we're going to spend our time exploring the New Testament books of 1st and 2nd Peter. These books are actually letters written to Christians living in the first century. And right in the beginning, in the very first sentence, we see that these letters were written by Peter, one of Jesus' original 12 disciples. Peter traveled with Jesus, lived alongside Jesus, witnessed his miracles, saw his death, and experienced his resurrection. Before leaving the earth, Jesus made Peter and the other disciples the first leaders of what we now know as the Christian church. Like all the books of the New Testament, these letters were not written to us, but they were written for us. Peter wrote these letters to ancient Christians living in a very different time and culture than our own. But as we explore this week, you'll see that this wisdom and encouragement he shares transcends historical and cultural boundaries. So let's get started. Today I'd like to start us off with a selection from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. Right off the bat, we see some religious and spiritual language that might be a bit confusing. So let me give you some historical context. Peter wrote this letter at a time when Christianity was still very small. To the society of that day, Christianity was considered a cult, a strange new offshoot of Judaism that existed on the fringes of Roman society. And as the movement kept spreading throughout the empire, the early Christians faced fierce persecution for their beliefs. They lived in an age where Roman society worshipped its emperor in the pantheon of Roman gods. The Roman Empire was massive. Its culture was all-encompassing. And this was the reality for most of the early Christians. This is why Peter refers to them as foreigners and exiles. They're living in a culture and context that is completely contrary to their Jesus-centered lifestyle. Now, things are pretty different for us today, but some things never change. Christianity is socially acceptable in our culture, but in many ways, we still live as foreigners and exiles in our own society. Following Jesus means pursuing a lifestyle that is radically different from the culture around us. Culture says consume and compete. Jesus says serve and give. Culture says look out for number one. Jesus says love God and love your neighbor. Many times, following Jesus puts us at odds with the cultural values of our day. And I don't mean that in just a negative way. I think we have an opportunity to be a huge breath of fresh air in our world. We bring light where there's darkness. We bring joy where there's sadness, hope where there's despair. It's love versus hate, community versus isolation, and so much more. Paul says, live such good lives among those who don't follow Jesus, that even though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. This means that people may not agree with our beliefs, but when we genuinely follow Jesus and share His love in our community, even those people will take notice. Even staunch enemies of organized faith can say, wow, maybe there's more to God than I thought. Maybe I haven't seen the whole picture here. Listen, our faith may make us foreigners and exiles in our own culture, but it's also an opportunity for us to be living representatives of Jesus, modeling for our friends and neighbors a kingdom of love, goodness, wholeness, restoration, transformation, and peace. In other words, let's go live our lives in a way that makes Jesus look good.